See, look, you let it's manageable.
When you're listening to some music that you love, or listening to a poem that you love, or being with a person that you love, you receive something, don't you? You receive the presence of the person, the presence of the music, the presence of the poem. It's the same with the plant, with all plants. They're all communicating with us. Everything's communicating, everything speaks. If I could snap my fingers, I'd want everyone to be Gaiad. That's to say, to have the realization, not an intellectual idea at all, not academic, nothing to do with writing or reading. You can be totally illiterate. Just to have the realization that we're living inside a living planet, a gigantic planetary organism, that the cosmos is alive, that everything's alive, that everything's sentient, and that the whole purpose of this existence is the cultivation and development of consciousness. But I want people to snap my fingers and they just have the experience without needing any words. Hey, we'll wake up in the morning, open the curtains, imagine Trump, and Putin and all these very nasty people. They open the curtains and wow, God, I didn't realize how beautiful, how alive everything is. I wish everyone could have that feeling. And if everyone did, we'd be able to solve our problems pretty quickly. The Western rational mind doesn't believe that nature speaks. It just thinks of nature as dead. It's just part of our culture. But it requires a poetic sensitivity. You have to work with your imagination and put your rational mind very much in the back seat. So it's a practice. Mainstream science is mostly thinking, some intuition, because of course scientists do recognize intuition is important, although not all of them do. And then sensing, we have to have sensing to do science. You have to sense the world. But it's better to do it through instruments rather than through your direct sensory experience. And feeling is completely out of the picture. Holistic science is a union of the four functions of our consciousness: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. We try to harmonize these four ways of knowing in ourselves. Yeah, sensing you can describe because, we all sense. I can touch this bottle and feel its temperature. And with thinking, I can write down an equation and we can all agree on that equation if we can do maths, even the most simple maths, 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, that's kind of thinking. Feeling is our inferior function, as Jung would say. Feeling and thinking are opposites. If you're good at thinking, you can't feel. If you're good at feeling, you can't think. And sensing and intuition are also opposites. So what is feeling? It's hard to describe it, but it's another way of knowing. It's when you feel whether something is good or not, good for you or not, or good for the planet, or good for the ecosystem, or good for society. It's another way of knowing. We're so used to knowing through our thinking. Feeling is, you could say, more poetic perhaps, and it's very denigrated in our culture. Our culture is way too focused on thinking, and not just any kind of thinking, reductionist thinking, the kind of thinking that reduces things down to their component parts. Whereas feeling sees things whole. It appreciates the value of things. I wish the translators of Jung hadn't used that word. They should have used valuing instead of feeling. Because there is emotion associated with it, but it's more being able to perceive the value. Like there's a pheasant walking around there, just now. Okay, how do I see that pheasant? If I feel, I can see the beauty of the pheasant, I feel the intrinsic value of the pheasant, I feel a connection with the pheasant, I feel the pheasant is important. It's a living being. I feel its value. Or the trees, in the forest, I know I mustn't cut them down because I feel their intrinsic value. I feel the fact that they exist means they have value. The only way we value things in our culture is through monetary value. That's already a thinking function. But we need to start valuing things because they have intrinsic value, not use value or instrumental value for us. And the whole culture needs to move much more into feeling. That's one of the reasons we're destroying the planet, is because we have no feeling. We don't feel the beauty of a landscape. We just think, oh, there's coal under there, or there's gold under there. Well, let's rip it out and get those minerals and turn them into cash. That's very dangerous. So that's why we need more feeling, or valuing, I would rather say. We need to learn how to value the intrinsic value of other people and of nature. And the same with intuition. We can't pin down what it is. Intuition is knowing where something has come from and knowing where it's going without knowing how you know. You can't, it's not like sensing or thinking. These are, feeling and intuition are much more difficult to pin down because they're much more subtle ways of knowing. But they're ways of knowing just as valid as thinking and sensing are. The trees are sentient, and they feel and they think in their own way, and they intuit, and they have the same functions as we do. A tree's got to find its way, its roots have got to find its way in the soil to nutrients. It's got to partner with mycorrhizal fungi. Think of the communication that goes on in the roots between mycorrhizal fungi and the tree. That's a kind of thinking. It's a kind of communication which involves a kind of thinking. It's not human thinking, but it's nevertheless a communication. And there's quantitative exchanges of water and nutrients between the two partners. That's a kind of thinking. And then a tree, it must feel really good when the sunlight of the right amount is raining down on its leaves. It must feel, oh, this is good. This is good for me, this sunlight. I can photosynthesize. And intuition, maybe a tree can intuit itself as part of Gaia, of the whole planet. I think the pheasant agrees. And then, sensing. Well, a tree obviously senses temperature and humidity and moisture in the soil. So of course a tree, every being has those four functions. You could even say every atom, maybe every subatomic particle has those four functions of consciousness inherent in them in some way. Otherwise, where do we get them from if they don't come from the physical basis of nature, from the atomic, subatomic structure or substratum of nature? So they must be there right at the very core of nature, those four functions. We're going to go somewhere really sacred now. It's not as good as I was hoping before. I'm the human of this woodland. I don't own it. I don't consider, legally in the Western world, Julia and I own it. I don't like that idea at all. It was waiting for us, and they needed us, because if it hadn't had us, they could have had some horrible housing developer, like there are so many around here now, cutting down these trees, managing it. Getting these rather insensitive woodland managers. They would look at this and say, oh, it's an old coppice, it needs to be coppiced. And they'd sort of cut down this beautiful tree. I say to this woodland, don't you worry, no one is going to touch you. I wouldn't even say I'm your guardian, I'm your human. I understand you, I know who you are. The woodland relaxes. And then as the woodland relaxes, I relax into the woodland. It's like the Aboriginal people in Australia and the Bushmen in Africa and the indigenous people in the Amazon. They all know it's a natural human thing to speak to nature and to know that trees speak and birds speak and plants speak. It's only us Westerners who've forgotten that, and that's why we wreck the planet. So you see, thinking and sensing are more, you could say, that masculine, solar, if you like, and feeling and intuition are more feminine or more lunar. But they're both equally important. You have to have the sun and the moon in your psyche, otherwise you can't be whole. And if you're not whole, you're going to cause a lot of trouble for yourself, for your society, and for the planet. And our society is not whole. It's very fragmented and focusing way too much on the wrong kind of thinking, reductionist thinking. We still need thinking, but we have holistic thinking, systems thinking, complexity theory thinking, thinking in feedbacks. That's the right kind of thinking that's consistent with our feeling, valuing, sensing and intuition in holistic science. English maple. I suppose I have a moment, and our students have moments of wholeness, you know, where you just feel the earth is alive, you're alive inside the living earth. The earth is much more sentient than you imagine. The organisms are sentient. There's consciousness in everything. Everything's conscious, one way or another. Everything is consciousness. It's all about consciousness. Those are the wonderful moments when you really know that, you know. It's no longer just an intellectual idea, but it's a sort of kind of knowing descends on you like a healing rain. You know, it's like the healing rain falls on you, and you just know, without any doubt,